The standard routes to achieving more power in a car are fairly well trodden. Turbochargers and superchargers, porting and polishing, freer flowing exhausts, and so on. The theory is that more air and fuel equals more power and torque. But alternatively, why not just add another engine? Motorsport has always been the crucible of the white heat of technology, but many developments turn out to be dead ends, and this spectacular racing machine is a case in point. With Germany dominating Grand Prix racing by the middle of the 1930s, national pride had to be salvaged in Italy. Scuderia Ferrari was given the task of matching the might of the Auto Union and Mercedes streamliners. The approach taken by team principal Enzo Ferrari and his technical director Luigi Bazzi was one of brute power. An Alfa Romeo P3 chassis was lengthened in order to accept two supercharged straight-8 engines in either 2.9 or 3.2 litre capacities, one in front and one behind the cockpit. Oddly, rather than using this placement to provide the car with four-wheel drive, both engines sent power to a mid-mounted differential, which then sent power back via two drive shafts to the rear wheels. Go figure. Raced under Formula Libre rules by Tazio Nuvolari and Louis Chiron, the cars could indeed run with the Mercedes of Rudolf Caracciola and Louis Fagioli. At least for the handful of laps before they needed to pit, because they'd run out of fuel. Or tyres. Or both. It did, however, set land speed records for both the flying mile and the flying kilometre, and cements its place in history by being possibly the first car to wear the famous Ferrari prancing horse. Originally intended for the farming community, the 2CV was adapted to the role of adventurer with the Sahara model. Several hundred were built for the purpose of oil and gas exploration in what were then France's North African colonies. A boot-mounted engine drove the rear wheels, and one out front the fronts, both mounted on a strengthened chassis. A single clutch, floor-mounted gear lever and accelerator linked the two engines, which were fed by separate fuel tanks under the front seats. With uprated suspension and still relatively light weight, that car could achieve 60 miles per hour off-road when both engines were running. However, in the event of failure of one of the engines, or just in order to save fuel, either could be run independently, making the car either front or rear-wheel drive. It did cut the top speed to 40 miles per hour, though. Before it became a quirky Riviera runabout, the Mini Moke was created as a low-cost, air-droppable alternative to the Jeep for the British Army, using the running gear of the Mini. It will come as no surprise to anyone who has driven one that lack of both ground clearance and four-wheel drive made it a total non-starter. BMC tried to solve the latter problem with a second engine added in the rear and matched to the front one using linked clutches and transmissions. There were even a couple of twin-engined four-wheel drive Mini Coopers built on the same principles, but with an equal lack of success. In fact, John Cooper's own version put him in hospital after a horrendous crash. The Lancia 037 was the last rear-wheel drive car to win the World Rally Championship before Audi's Quattro moved the goalposts for good. Aware that it needed to meet this challenge, Lancia developed a test bed using its sober front-wheel drive Trevi saloon, which used a torquey, supercharged twin-cam four-cylinder to drive the front wheels. So, in order to develop a four-wheel drive system for the next generation of Lancia rally cars, test driver Giorgio Pianta removed the rear seats of the car and mounted a second front subframe, complete with engine and gearbox in its place. The car's rear doors were welded up and large scoops mounted in them to cool the second engine. The two gearboxes were linked mechanically but the engines used a very rudimentary drive-by-wire system, which delayed power delivery to the rear axle in an attempt to reduce oversteer. Fast and effective, the car was also overweight due to the duplicated mechanics and tended to overheat. It did, however, pave the way for the Lancia Delta S4. Long before Volkswagen decimated the Pikes Peak record with the IDR, the company had its sights set on being the fastest firm up Colorado Springs' famous hill. It began in the mid-1980s, back when batteries were for Walkmans, not cars. So, in order to give the Golf enough pace to run up the hill, the Ingolstadt engineers simply crammed another engine in behind the front seats to drive the rear wheels. Even doubled up, the naturally aspirated 1.8-litre inline fours from the Golf GTI ran out of puff as the altitude increased, managing third place in 1985, the year Michel Mouton became queen of the climb, using the much more logical Audi Quattro. VW wanted the car to look as similar as possible to the showroom models to help boost sales, so that ruled out any massive external aerodynamics. Instead, mechanical grip was sought by building a stock-looking but 20cm wider body shell out of Kevlar. Underneath, two turbocharged 1.8-litre GTI engines in an aluminium monocoque gave a total of 652 horsepower. The stock-ish looking Golf was actually fastest up the hill, until something broke a few corners from the finish, and the Audi won again. Trust Mercedes to pull off the twin-engine trick in a package that is not only entirely sensible, but, thanks to the 3 letters after its model name, also a bit bonkers. The original A-Class was a clever bit of design, with a sandwich floor that placed the engine below the level of the occupants. This meant that the engineers at AMG could add a second engine to the car underneath the boot. The result, other than flared wheel arches covering beefy AMG alloys and a dinky roof spoiler, didn't look all that different from a standard A-Class. However, at the flick of a switch, the second engine came into play, doubling the now four-wheel drive car's output to 250 horsepower and 360 Newton-meters of torque. Reports on how many were built vary, but one was gifted to Mika Hakkinen after he won the 1998 Formula One Championship in a Mercedes-powered McLaren.